The story begins a dozen years ago in a place halfway around the world, Hong Kong, in the early 1990s. It was a time of uncertainty. 1997 was looming, the year that Communist China would take control of Hong Kong. And millions of Hong Kong Chinese were desperately looking for a way out. And Canada was far and away the country of choice. There were huge lineups at Canada's High Commission in Hong Kong to apply for visas, but there were some in the crowd who should have raised suspicion. Former Royal Hong Kong Police Inspector Sandy Boucher.
Organized crime figures, people with records, people without records, but serious criminals were looking to move to Canada. Some applied and got turned back, and some applied and got in.
And one of Boucher's cases proved exactly that. As the head of the Royal Hong Kong Police Narcotics Bureau, he was closing in on a notorious drug trafficker known as the Ice Queen. Li Chaoping's gang was producing almost 500 tons of the street drug crystal meth, also known as ice. When the police raided her labs and one of her safe houses, the Ice Queen got on a plane to Canada.
You thought perhaps she was just going for a couple of weeks or a holiday? Or...
Oh, sure. I knew before the raid went down that it would probably spook her and her syndicate, and we assumed that she'd go over there, wait till things had died down a little, and she'd come back.
Boucher couldn't believe it when an RCMP officer called to say that the Ice Queen had landed.
And I said, well, of course she's landing. It's an airplane, you know. He said, no, she's landing. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. And it turned out he meant she's going to be a landed immigrant. She was landing as an immigrant. And I said, it can't be. She's got a criminal record. I know that she's known to Canadian authorities. She was a major organized crime figure.
Plus, she's one of the biggest targets in Hong Kong and China at that time.
Yeah, that's who she was.
Li Chaoping was welcomed by the Canadian government as a business investor. Her story? She was willing to invest $170,000 in a fast food chicken franchise in, of all places, the wilds of northern Saskatchewan, a tiny town called L'Orange. Back in Hong Kong, some were beginning to wonder, if a high-profile criminal like the Ice Queen could get into Canada, how many other criminals were also being welcomed? It seemed that Chinese organized crime groups, known as the Triads, had found a way. Brian McAdam was the immigration control officer at Canada's High Commission in Hong Kong at the time. He was sending detailed intelligence back to Ottawa, warning that Canadian embassy staff were fraternizing with the wrong people.
Who were they associating with that caused you concern?
People that I knew, I had very good reason to believe were Triad members, Triad leaders.
Organized crime, Chinese organized crime.
Yeah.
And what were they doing with these people? Were they...
Well, they go to parties, they go to cocktail parties. I'd see them, people at the cocktail parties. Trips to Macau, shopping trips to Bangkok.
Expensive gifts, luxury yachts, trips to the casinos in Macau. But that wasn't all. Gary Clement is now the chief of police in the small town of Cobourg, Ontario. But in the early 1990s, he was an RCMP officer stationed at the High Commission in Hong Kong. Clement found more signs of corruption. Money handed out to Canadian embassy staff to bet on the horses at Hong Kong's luxurious Happy Valley racetrack. But that was only the first part of the deal. Clement remembers a warning that he received from a wealthy and connected businessman.
The one thing that he told me very early on in my time there is nobody in the Chinese culture does anything for nothing. And I never forgot that. And I think that's where you have to look at why was the Canadian mission being targeted? Why was the Canadian mission being invited out to all these events? Well, we all know Canadian passports.
And it gets worse. At the time, all visa applications were being processed electronically. McAdam and Clement had come up with a special code to identify known criminals who had applied. Code H. Brian McAdam couldn't believe his eyes one day when, sitting at his computer, he opened his secret file of known Triad members to discover someone had broken into the system.
Suddenly, within just a few seconds of the name and the details appearing, the name just started dropping off like the letters were sliding off a ruler sort of thing, they're just falling down, and the screen was blank. I thought I was doing something wrong, so I thought I'll just grab another file that doesn't have this code, see what happens. The other files came out, no problem. They didn't disappear. Just my files, which were coded H.
And these files were essential because this was the basis of the intelligence that you had collected
Yes.
on some very bad guys who wanted into Canada.
Right.
And with that information deleted from the computer,
Yes.
all of a sudden they would look clean
Oh, indeed. Yeah.
and just be let through the
Yeah.
system.
Yeah.
The evidence was mounting that something was going on. The RCMP launched an investigation, and the Department of Foreign Affairs sent over a computer expert. The top secret report, prepared by David Balser in 1992, confirmed the worst suspicions. There were alarming breaches of Canada's immigration policies. But for reasons unexplained, the RCMP investigation ignored the Balser report.
Anybody that saw that report should have taken very definitive action. Why it was not taken, I don't know.
The Mounties also paid little attention to evidence of bribery, forgery of visas, and profiteering at the Canadian High Commission. How compromised was Canada at that point?
It was extremely vulnerable. And the most disturbing thing is that no one took this problem seriously at the time.
No one, except for Brian McAdam, who was pushing for a full inquiry into the allegations of corruption and fraud, allegations that pointed directly to the staff at the High Commission. But suddenly, the career civil servant who had received glowing performance reviews found himself shunned by his colleagues.
Nobody wanted to talk to me, and I became very ostracized within the office.
Well, no wonder they didn't want to talk to you. You were the guy
Yeah, I was trouble.
turning over all the stones and
I was
rocks.
trouble.
You were trouble. Despite all the efforts to shut McAdam down, the scandal would not go away. Too many people knew.